Hey everybody, Fetty here, and welcome to part 8, the final episode of my How to Build a Pole Barn series. In this video, I want to talk about some things like the planning of the project, the materials involved, the do-overs, I wish I'd have thought about this, and what's on everybody's mind, how much did it cost me to get this thing built to this point. So let's get started. Now, I'm kind of bad for just winging things and just playing by ear, but on this project I put a lot of thought into it before I ever got started. And you know, that's not to say that I didn't wing some stuff along the way, but I had a pretty good idea of where I was going before I ever broke ground on this. Now, one of the first things that I did before I ever broke ground on this project is I drew a 3D model of this barn in a program called SketchUp, and I think SketchUp's pretty awesome. There's a paid version of it that's pretty expensive, but there's also a free version, and I drew it in the free version, and it had all the functionality that I could imagine ever needing. Now, what that allowed me to do was be able to visualize this thing. With SketchUp, you can walk through it, and you can fly over it and pan around and see it from all different angles and different perspectives. And that allowed me to get an image in my mind of what this thing ought to look like and how it ought to be laid out and where everything ought to be. Now, that first model that I drew, it wasn't super accurate, but it gave me an idea of what things ought to look like, and that really helped me as I was down here working to have that burned into my brainstem to kind of have an idea of where I was going with it. Now, after I finished the project, I went back and I drew another just ridiculously accurate model of this barn, right down to the scab boards that I put in it. And that's pretty cool, and if you want to take a look at that, I'll put a link in the description box where you can click over to my website and read about it, and if you want to get a copy of it, it'll be over there. You can check it out. So having that model, it was better for me than having a set of blueprints. It just helped me more, and I think that that's a tool that I'm going to put in my toolbox and utilize on future projects that I might do. So moving on, I've got some notes and some things I wanted to mention, and this is free advice, and like Daddy always said, you can do with it what you want to because it's free. But one of the things that I wanted to mention that you might want to think about, if you can get some help, then maybe you ought to think really hard about lining up some help for this. I did everything on this project by myself except setting the trusses and putting the roof on. And I understand there's some bragging rights involved with that, and I get it, but this project would have gone a lot quicker, and there would have been a whole lot less man hours involved if I'd have had some help. You know, some of the things like setting the trusses, you just can't do that by yourself. It's just too dangerous. Putting the roof on, you can't do it by yourself because it just takes too long. But there are other things like putting the bands on, like manhandling a 16-foot 2x12. Luckily, I had my old tractor, and I was able to use that bucket to help, assist me and maneuver those big boards up. But if I didn't have that, I don't know what in the world I would have done. I guess I'd have been using Egyptian technology or something. That was tough. Putting the sheeting on the high parts, that was pretty hard to do by myself. And if I had some help, some of those 2-foot strips that I cut, I would have probably used larger pieces and done it that way. Putting the purlins in, if I'd have just had somebody on the ground handing them up to me so I could nail them into place, that would have saved a lot of time. Wrapping the house, that's one you can do by yourself, but the wind gets to blowing a little bit and it just turns into a mess and starts whipping that house wrap all over the place, and it's just aggravating. So things like that. And then a big one is mixing that doggone concrete. My goodness. Manhandling those big 80-pound bags of concrete by yourself and mixing it and dumping it and wheelbarrowing it and all that kind of stuff. It took so long to do that if you'd have had some help, it's just about the efficiency of the project. But like I said, if I had it to do over again, would I ask for some help? Nah, probably not, because a lot of it's about bragging rights, and I get it. Another thing that I wanted to mention is don't do a project like this over the winter. I started this thing in 1st of November, and everything was pretty good, but as the winter drug on, it was tough to get this project done in the winter. Some of this stuff is kind of obvious to me now that I've been through the project, and it might be obvious to you before you ever started one, but one thing that caused me a little bit of aggravation is all the dirt where I dug these holes. If you can sacrifice about an hour or so of work time and clean that dirt up after you dig them, it'll save you some aggravation, because you're going to think you're going to have this done sooner than you will, and you'll think that dirt ain't going to be laying there very long or long enough to make a mess, but it will be. And it's going to rain one time, and it's going to turn muddy and get messy, and make it slick climbing up a ladder, and you won't be able to find a place to set your ladder up because the dirt's going to be in the way. If you can spend a little time and just scrape that dirt back, because you're not going to need it, you're putting concrete back in the hole, so scrape that dirt back and just have it out of your way. That's one thing. As stupid as it is, I wish that I would have done that on day one, and it would have saved me some aggravation down the road. The next thing that kind of comes to my mind has to do with concrete. There's 72 80-pound bags of concrete involved in this project. And some of that's my fault, because these posts on the corners, I had to open those holes up a little bit. And you wouldn't think that opening a hole up, this much would really add that much concrete to it. But I guess when you go down 3.5 feet, these corner posts, I just kept pouring concrete in there. I didn't think I was ever going to fill them holes up. So, the time involved in mixing 72 bags of concrete was just ridiculous. If I had it to do over again, I would have brought a concrete truck in here. I'd have leveled these holes up with some concrete. Of course, I had to mix that. I'd have got the holes level, I'd have put the posts in it, I would have braced them off, got them good and plumb, and I'd have brought a concrete truck in here and just filled those holes full of concrete. It's about the time savings. Now, that would probably even save a little money. Most of these concrete companies have like a 2-yard minimum these days. But if you think about it, 72 bags of concrete is almost 2 yards. So even with a 2-yard minimum, it has still been cheaper, because I think you could buy 2 yards of concrete off a truck a lot cheaper than buying 2 yards of concrete out of a bag. I'd have probably saved a few bucks that way, but it's about the time. So that's one thing. If I had to do over, I'd do that part over. If you watched one of the later videos where I framed in for this door here, that kind of came as an afterthought. Even with the Google SketchUp model, I didn't have that in there, and that came as an afterthought. If I had it to do over again, I'd have set an extra post right there so I'd have something to hang a door off of. Now, I framed it up just fine, and I'm satisfied with it, but it just added time and aggravation to it and some more material. But I'd have probably set another post right there. If I had it to do over again, I might double band the sides like I did the front and the back. And that's not so much because of the strength or the structural integrity of the building, because I'm satisfied it's strong. But it would have given a little better surface, a little wider surface to lay those end trusses on. It didn't cause me too much problem, but it might have made things a little bit easier. And talking about the trusses, a couple of things that I might have done different on that is, I laid out my hangers on the ground before I ever, put the trusses up. On those ends, I might have went ahead and sheeted those ends before I put those up. And really, I was on my way to doing that, but I had some help that day and they showed up before I got it done. That could save a little time and aggravation. Just go ahead and sheet and wrap at those 2 end trusses. That would have helped out a little bit. And I might have even gone as far as notching out for those gable ladder supports while they were on the ground. That would have probably saved me a little bit of time and aggravation. It was kind of hard to climb up there on a ladder and notch those things out with a skill saw while they were standing. So that's a couple things. And the other thing that I failed to mention in my last video about the roofing that I did, and I'll show you a picture here. I went ahead and came in after the fact on these 2 end trusses, and I put some cross bracing in there. There was some wiggle up on the top of that roof, and it would have probably tightened up once the metal went on it, but there was some wiggle and it was kind of bothering me. So I came in on these end trusses and I cross braced them, and when I did that, man, it stiffened those trusses up like crazy because it can't wiggle anywhere. And then when I got the metal on it, that roof is really good and strong now. So I'll show you a picture of that, and that's something you can think about, and I feel better about having done that. Now on the layout of the purlins, I had two things that kind of caused me some aggravation. If you go back and watch, I guess it was maybe the roofing video, you'll see that I didn't have a purlin on the very end of the trusses, and because of that I didn't have anything to nail the drip edge to, and I had to go back in there and scab in some boards. It wasn't that big a deal, and it turned out fine. It just took me a lot of time to go back in and scab those boards on the front and the back. So probably what I would have done, the way I laid those trusses out, and you can go back and watch, I think it's part 3 of the series. I started on the end and I put them on 2-foot centers, and I just started on the end and measured up 2 foot and put the first one, and then measured up 2 foot and put the next one. I'd have probably started on the end and put a purlin in, put a hanger on it, and then measured up 2 foot and kind of did it that way. That caused me a little bit of grief. Wasn't a big disaster, but that would be something that I might do over again. The other thing, if you watch the roofing video, you'll see that my ridge cap is really wide. It's about 14 inches wide, and that last run of purlins almost wasn't set back far enough for me to have a place to screw the ridge cap in. Now I think those ridge caps come in narrower pieces, so just kind of be thinking about that when you either spec out your metal or when you lay your purlins out. Just make sure that last run of purlins, they're set back far enough so that when you go to put your ridge cap on, you'll have plenty of room to screw in your ridge cap. Now on the sheeting, like I was mentioning a minute ago, if I had to do over again, I'd have sheeted those end trusses before I ever stood them up. It would have done two things. It would have saved me some time and aggravation of carrying that heavy sheeting up a ladder, but it would have also eliminated the problem that I had of having a nailing surface. If you can go back and watch the sheeting video, you'll see that when I started putting those top pieces in, I didn't have any surface to nail them to, and I had to go in and spend several hours scabbing in boards so that I'd have something to nail them to. That would have saved me some time there. So I'd have probably tried to go about it that way and save some aggravation. Now, how long did it take me to do this? I started the very 1st of November and I ended the end of March. And as far as man hours or work hours, there were 220 hours involved in building this barn. And of that 220, 182 were mine, and 38 were help hours. Now, keep in mind that I was filming video, and that accounted for some of that time, because setting all this stuff up, I mean, there's time involved in that. So I don't know how much time, but you could subtract off some amount of time for that. But the point is there's a lot of work hours, and if you, like I said at the beginning, if you would have some help, even one helper would exponentially cut the number of hours involved in this. But if you're thinking about doing it by yourself, and keep in mind I was filming, and I'll tell you the truth, I work kind of slow. I'm kind of meticulous and slow and scratch my head a lot, but there's a lot of hours involved in this. So now for the grand finale. How much did it cost me to build this thing and get it to this point? It cost me just under $5,000. It was around $3,500 for the framing material and the lumber and all that, and concrete and everything like that. And it was about $1,400 for the roof metal. And I thought, how could I have value engineered that cost down any more than I did? And there's just, I don't think there's a whole lot of room for it. I mean, I could have maybe saved 50 or 100 bucks here and maybe 20 there. But I just don't think that there's a whole lot of room to take a lot of that cost out of that. Now over on the website, I have a kind of a basic lumber list, and you can go over there and click on it and download it, and you can have that and kind of reference it. But the other thing that I've done is I've created a ridiculously comprehensive materials list over on the website, and there'll be a link in the description box where you can click and follow it on over to where that is. And in that list, I've got everything from the string that I use to lay it out, to the stakes, to the batterboard lumber to nails and screws and glue and lumber and all the way up to the trusses and to the roof. Now the trusses, I had those engineered, and I think I paid around $520 or something like that. It's on the list what I paid for it. But on this list, the other cool thing is for 98% of the things on this list, I've put a Lowe's item number. And what that will allow you to do is anytime, whether it's today or 5 years from now, you can take that list and look the current price up, and the spreadsheet will calculate it on out and then total at the bottom. So that'll give you the ability to kind of price a job like this or something really similar to it. Now there were a few things that I didn't buy from Lowe's. They don't sell these yellow pine 2x12s that I use for the banding. I bought those at a local contractor yard. But I believe in that spreadsheet I've put the actual cost that I paid, so it'll give you kind of an idea of what it might cost you. Now another thing that I've done is in that materials list, for every board in there, I've put a reference number. And kind of as a companion to that, I created another SketchUp model. And in that model, I've stamped every board in the model so that it cross-references back over to the materials list. And you know, that will tell you off of that list where every board goes. It's the closest thing to a pole barn instruction manual that I think I could create. That's also over on the website, and the link will be down here where you can go check that out if you want to, but it'll really help you know where all this lumber goes, right down to the scab boards. So if you don't mind, go over and visit my website. Obviously I'm trying to build my website up and get some traffic going over in that direction, and just check it out and see what I've got over there. Hope you enjoyed this video and got something out of it, and I hope it helps you out if you plan a project like this. I really appreciate everybody who's watched the pole barn series of videos, especially those who have watched faithfully from beginning to end and who have faithfully left comments and sent me notes. I really appreciate that. As always, if you like my videos, remember, give me a thumbs up, leave me some comments, and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Today's the and I drew it in the free, ridiculously accurate model of this bolt. It framed up just fine. I'm satisfied with the way it framed. How much did it cost me? Still got this so cold.